So one of my life goals is to make it through December 31st.
Wild.
That's why you got the Tesla, dude.
Lord willing.
Lord willing.
Who's driving the Y out there?
That's me. I just got it.
We're not going this. We're not going this route again. We're not. Every podcast somebody
We
says,
have not.
whose Tesla is that? No, but I'm
It's
saying
been
it's
2
going to
weeks.
become that way.
No.
Because everyone's like, whose Tesla is that? It's mine. And by the way, let me tell you about it for 15 minutes.
I have not done that.
I'm kidding.
So I just got mine back. I have a Y as well.
Okay.
And it was in the shop for 3
what?
months.
For what?
The whole side got wrecked because somebody slammed into it. Like my wife was taking it around a corner and this lady just T-boned her basically.
Ugh.
Oh my goodness.
And so it was in the shop for no joke for 3 months. We put it in right after Christmas.
Yeah.
And it stayed in there until end of March, like 1st of April.
Yeah.
That's a long
That's
time.
a
very long time.
Really long time. At that point, you're like, just give me a new car.
Right.
Like, what's happening?
And so I finally got it back.
But
and
it wasn't totaled.
No, not
obviously.
totaled, but about 15,000 worth of damage. And I got it back, and I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and I've had it for like 4 years. I bought it in 2020. And I was like, I'm going to go ahead and hunker down and keep it. And so I wrapped it. I wrapped it in Expel, and it looks so good.
That's sick,
It's all
dude.
soft. It's a matte wrap.
Yeah.
So
What
it's just
color?
same color as the car. So
Yeah.
Expel is just paint protection,
Yeah.
but it's you can get it in a matte finish, satin. So I did that, and it looks so good.
That's
I
sweet.
just got that done like 2 weeks ago.
That's really cool.
And I'm pumped about it. So anyway,
I love that.
yeah, it's very, very cool.
Tesla talk.
Tesla
Here on
talk.
the MxU Podcast.
There's gonna be there's gonna start to be a Tesla segment. Did you watch the edit yet of the last podcast?
No.
You'll have to check it out.
It's pretty funny.
Marcus-
You'll enjoy
The
it.
one that came out today?
Yeah.
Was it the one that came out today?
Yeah, with me, you, and Joe. Where you really went down the Tesla.
I had just gotten it 3 days before.
He doesn't like this bit.
So-
he doesn't like this bit.
That we know.
So I've actually gotten off on this crazy tangent in the last 6 months to a year, where I've been buying all this pressure washing and like car washing gear. So I now have a pressure washer built into my garage.
No
I
way.
went ahead and plumbed it.
Oh, I love
I had a
that.
guy come over and just run a pipe, and so I can now just like walk up and grab the pistol
It's always
and
on.
water on, and
Dude,
away we go.
That's
it's
sick.
sick.
I need that for my patio, my pergola.
Seriously,
Yeah.
It's 100 feet long. It's 100 foot. It's a Cox reel.
Yeah.
So there's this company, Obsessed Garage, out there. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's like this. What they do is they do like really high end, like cool garage accessories. It's kind of like MxU for garages.
Yeah.
Let's
That's
think about it
really
like that.
interesting.
That's cool.
And then they have like a video podcast and all this stuff. Anyway, they have kind of curated different things that go together. So like they have like a pressure washer that goes with the right reel, with the right pistol. So all the stuff, right? And it's kind of expensive, but it's fun. It's like a fun little hobby.
Yeah.
So I've been buying like little bits, and then now I'm kind of
The
getting
fact that
into
he
soaps.
calls his pressure washer handle a pistol
Yeah.
means
It's
you're
sick.
into
That's-
it.
This is the
Yeah.
thing with Tony.
This is
Tony
dad
knows how
talk
to get a
right
rig
now.
dialed, and I've known this about Tony for a while now, and it just warms my soul. It makes me feel like I'm seen. But like I remember when you came in for the workshop, and I don't think you brought your own MA, but you brought you had your full rig dialed, and I remember you went in there and you were just so meticulous. Everything needed to be in the right spot, and I was like,
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse.
no, it really is. It's
He's
like
the same way.
It's what it is 100% blessing and a curse. And there's days where I'm like, I need this to, I can't do this anymore. Like, it's like, but then I realize, no, it's actually, it can be a good quality as long as you harness it.
Yeah.
So-
I don't know. Yeah. So my OCD gets me sometimes. It ends up wasting tons of time because I'm like, no, this has to be, that has to be, no,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're like, why have I wasted all this time on this? I could have been programming or whatever.
Dude, I bet.
So how often do you vacuum your car?
Once a week usually.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Once a
See,
week.
that's-
Spencer is
I
just
feel like I'm looking at the same people.
Well, this is
because-
why I love Tony. So I just want to hang out with him more. He makes me feel.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I have 5-year-olds, so it's like I've got to be like, dude, it's
all right,
always
we
a
got
mess.
nuggets and fries back here.
Oh,
We got to
yeah,
take care
always.
of it.
And I'm really meticulous about my car, so it's like always like
Yeah.
it looks like it's new all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a project to keep it that way with
Yeah.
kids because they don't respect that at all
Yeah.
or understand.
this guy. So he old family boat, and he has this storage container out at the dock, and He like built it, set up the whole rig. The power is like rigged perfectly for everything that's needed. And he has it down to like you unlock the locker and he has little bungees that he's drilled holes into the side of the roof so that the doors can close all the way, stay shut. And then he's got his cleaning, all of his cleaning products, all of the sunscreen.
Yeah.
Then he's got the spot where the speaker just sits and has the charger there.
Yeah.
And it is of all the towel hooks. He's got the bungees for all the skis.
And then my
he's
kids
got
fully
it
get
figured out.
it.
But let me just be honest.
I fully get this.
It's needed.
Most people who are watching the MxU podcast would adhere to the fact that there is a place for everything
Yep.
and
Yes.
everything in its place.
Everything has a place.
Like I've got, there are people who are watching that I know
Yep.
who have like pegboard in their garage
Yep.
with every tool
Yeah.
outlined.
Yeah.
Like it's like
Yeah.
not just we don't have a set of wrenches. We have this particular set of wrenches in this
Yeah.
particular order. And
Because they believe in Jesus.
right.
Because they have conviction in
We're
their
not
life.
monsters.
Yeah, we're not monsters.
Mise en place.
Yeah.
Everything in its place.
Well, everything has a place, and
I didn't know you
I hope
spoke
my
French.
wife is listening to this podcast. This has been an ongoing thing in our marriage for about 10 years now. She's pretty great. I'm the problem, legitimately. I'm clinical, so.
But we're saying it's not a
Well,
problem.
let me give you some background on it. Okay, so
Oh, by the way, welcome to the MxU podcast. We're here with our good friend Tony Fransen, and we're going to talk about some lighting stuff in a minute. But please,
yeah.
continue.
Well, here's
Continue.
the thing. I got to the point with the pressure washing thing where I could not get the car done quick enough.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, I was having to go around the side of the house, plug it into the hose,
another
drag
hose,
the
yeah.
hose in, plug it all up, do all this stuff. My shoes get muddy in the process. It's like all this stuff. So I just decided, let's just have it to where I can just walk up, grab the thing, and go.
the pistol, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, it's like got this. It all rotates and moves, and it's really nice. And it's easy.
Yeah.
That's the jam.
That's sick.
And that kind of comes from the production background,
Yeah.
where especially touring, where we're trying to get in and get up as fast as possible, right?
Right.
So what do? You spend a bunch of time on the prep, which I think is a lost art right now because we got a lot of new people in our industry. But it's all about getting it to where you can easily just walk in, send the rig up in the air, and everything starts firing.
Yep.
That's good.
That doesn't exist right now in a lot of companies, or if the guys that are really good at it are few and far between. That's what I'm trying to say.
Because tour prep used to be the thing.
That's right.
I want every case to roll in, lid pops up, every cable comes out in the right order,
Yeah.
and you're good.
Yeah, it's ready to go.
I don't see that much anymore.
No, it's hard to find. And so I've been working. I want to start like a Tony's OCD list for crew guys.
Yeah.
And
like
here's
that.
how we do this. Let's reminders of how to do touring and how to do it well. Because I feel like it was drilled into me as a kid, and now it's sort of like it's spilled over in other parts of my life where it's like even at my desk, okay, it's like I have everything in TechFlex going down the side. You barely even know there's cables going up to
Spencer,
the
you
desk.
must be just like shivering inside right now.
Just the warm and fuzzies. I want to cry, honestly.
But it's it spills over in weird ways. But my wife like looks at me like you are freaking crazy.
Yeah.
But I just love everything to be in its place and to be dialed and not have to think about the technology I'm using or the equipment I'm using.
Yeah.
Right.
And it just kind of blends into the background, just becomes about the thing I'm trying to do.
Well, and it ultimately, at least for me, it leads to greater efficiency. Like everything is it's super hard for me to function in a messy environment. And I know there are people who can, and I'm like, more power to you, but like having things I hate losing things. If I lose the smallest thing, it will drive me bananas. I will look all over for that thing.
Yeah.
'Cause I just everything's got its place. But that's probably what has made you so successful too, Tony, is just having, when you're putting designs together, like those things require attention to detail.
Yeah.
So I think it is, I'm not going to say that, you have to be this way. I don't wish it upon anybody, but it can be helpful. If you are wired this way, it can be helpful.
And when something goes wrong, because something will go wrong, when you know where everything is, when you already have a clear space, it's so much easier to like fix the problem and address the problem because you're not having to look for whether it be a tool or what's this whole chain. Like you just can dial in and know, okay, this is how things are. This is where I put things. It just Yeah.
Well, because on a tour, you've got literally thousands of pieces
Yeah.
that are required to put this thing together.
Yeah, it's insane.
You know, whether it's stuff that's in your workbox or whether it's stuff that's in cable trunks or whether it's fixtures or, you know, whatever the case may be. It's like there is a ton of stuff that has to be in the same place tomorrow when we go to load in.
Yeah.
After load out tonight, it's got to be ready for tomorrow. And so it's like that, just that process mindset. I think so many of our viewers and listeners can benefit from that because I can't tell you the number of churches. You did a church tour recently. Can't tell you the number of churches where you walk into their amp room or their gear closet or whatever you know, wherever your stuff is, and it's just a mishmash of chaos. Like nobody knows. I need a 25-foot XLR. Nobody knows the difference between the 100-footer, the 10-footer, or the 50-footer because they're all in the same place. It's like it's such a time sucker and makes troubleshooting, like you said, so much more difficult.
No, it's so true. It's so true. No, I went to a church over Easter. Actually, they'd asked me to come in and just help them get their Easter event together. So I kind of came in, and one of their prerequisites around coming in was to tidy up the space. We were there for about a week. And so I said, hey, I need to bring a gaffer with me because I can't program, you know, help rehang the room and do it all.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that's more than one person. So I added a friend of mine, Luke Carver, and we went up there and we rehung a bunch of stuff. And one of the things that they appreciated when we were done is that everything looked extremely tidy. And so that was a huge testament to Luke. He kind of came in knowing the expectations that I had laid out in advance. I said, hey, we want to leave this place way better than we found it. And so, and there's a church without a lighting director at the moment. And so they were just needing somebody to kind of come in and care for the equipment for a minute. And so that was a really fun experience, but it also, that's where, again, where those OCD tendencies come out. It's like, okay, hey, if all this is going to function every day, we have to get it to where, you know, the cables are loomed, the trusses can be lowered easily. This church happened to have a nice fly bay where you could like fly things in and out. And I said, we just have to have all that tidy to where it all is managed and easy to deal with every day.
Yeah.
When they need to service a fixture, you just lower the truss and boom, it just comes right in. You're not having to really mess with like untying cable and, oh, that's linked to that and that and that. You know, there's none of that going on.
That's good.
And so, you know, getting a space to be functional is huge in the church world. Yeah. Because if you can't service the equipment, then it falls apart.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway.
So let's talk for a few minutes about the tour that you were on earlier this year because you helped kind of design, prep, and then you were out for a few weeks with Phil Wickham's tour.
Yeah.
And it was all in churches.
Yeah.
So give us like, because there's such a disparity, between churches when you walk in.
Yeah.
So give us like some tips for the church that really needed help, and then something that you saw that was just awesome.
Yeah. So I went into, well, we did rehearsals actually in a church.
Okay.
For about, I think we were there for almost a week, a little less than a week maybe.
Was that the site of the first show?
Yeah, it was the site of the first show. So we did our kind of first night performance, our first event there. And then we also sat there for 3 or 4 days, 5 days, something like that, and just kind of tidied up programming and just got everything ready to go. You know, that was an interesting building because I won't call it out, but the gist was it was an older church, but I kind of got the sense that it had been almost abandoned production-wise. There was old equipment. You could tell it was really happening at one point, but it was almost like it had been given up on. Yeah. Like, we don't want to spend money on this or whatever. And so like there were certain things that were really great. Like the LED wall was great. But like they had this huge LED wall. It was like the width of the stage. We ended up covering it up because we weren't using that in our show. But you know, they had a very nice LED wall. But then like lighting wise, they didn't have backlight in the right place. They didn't have key lights that were bright enough for their cameras. They just had all these like other problems. The key light was so dark when we brought in a huge amount of lighting, right? And it was so dark I couldn't get it bright enough to compete with what we were doing behind the band.
Wow.
And so it just sort of like it was just sort of left to its, you know, sad, depressing world, I guess.
Yeah.
It was just odd. It was
Yeah.
just very, very odd. And then, a night later, we were in South Florida, and we were at a great church, and it had all new equipment, had moving lights everywhere that you needed them.
Yeah.
Great key light locations, great backlight locations,
Yeah.
great audience lighting. And, that was fun to see the contrast of that. I haven't toured in churches in a very long time. And so it was, I wasn't out for long, but I got to enjoy just seeing what that process looks like every day, day to day. So
That's cool,
it was
man.
interesting. Yeah.
Tony, just give us you're going to share a ton of wisdom today. And I think what is going to help the folks listening is to have some context for that wisdom. So, briefly, because you've got a long story, but what would your upbringing look like? What's your involvement in the church look like over the years?
Yeah.
You obviously serve in the touring market, and you've done a ton. So just give people some context for who you are amidst this discussion.
Yeah. So, I've kind of worn a lot of different hats over the years. And I kind of came up being a lighting programmer. Kind of after a while, that turned into accepting design jobs. I lived in Nashville for nearly 20 years. And in that time, I kind of worked for a bunch of different genres of music. So I did a lot of Christian music coming up. Started out, my very first tour actually was a pop tour. It was with a boy band.
Okay.
And then I went from there to doing a lot of Christian music.
What got you into the Christian, into that scene? Was it just like a church? Did you have relationships? Like, what brought you there?
Yeah, so I came up, my parents had a ministry back in the 90s.
Okay.
And they traveled all over the country. And that was sort of my first foray into traveling. I kind of grew up traveling with them.
Okay.
My mom and dad were singers
Okay.
when I was a real little kid. And so they would do like 200 dates a year crossing Canada and the northern part of the U.S.
Wow.
They were from Vancouver. And so they toured all over the place and in an RV. And so I kind of grew up that way. And then, as I got into my like tween years, I guess you could say 10, 12, they decided they wanted to relocate to the U.S. So they moved to Northwest Arkansas. And that was kind of how I got introduced to Northwest Arkansas. I was there for about 3 or 4 years, and they started a dramatic ministry at that point, and started doing plays in churches all over the country.
Wow.
And so that was sort of like that section of my life.
Yeah.
Still traveling, doing about 30 weeks a year, and then we moved to Nashville when I was about 17.
Yeah.
And we continued doing the dramatic ministry for a while, and I started pulling back out of that because I started getting really interested in lighting.
Yeah.
And at that point, probably about 2000, 2001, somewhere in there, is when I kind of launched off and started doing lighting full time.
Okay.
That's
And
cool.
So that was kind of your tie to the
Yeah.
CCM. Okay.
Yeah. And so I grew up with a ministry mindset. And so that, Christian music was never a distant thing for me. It was always sort of right there in the foreground. I always thought it would be a great learning ground, and then maybe I could turn that into enough experience to go out and do other genres, you know? I never wanted it to be just about Christian music. I always wanted to be able to have a wide, diverse set of things that I'd worked on. And so I did turn that into like doing country, and I've worked for a number of country artists directly, and then some pop and rock, and those are just things that I've always loved,
Yeah.
So
That's cool. So obviously doing the drama thing growing up,
yeah.
I'm sure the theatrical bent for your exposure and all that really helped
Yeah.
kind of, at least in terms of the practical application for lighting. I mean, I would expect that you would have sort of a different sensibility having that theatrical background rather than just a rock show background.
Yeah. So, the thing about that is it lends you to connect emotion to what we do. And so, I think that may be the first. I hate to call it manipulative, but it almost feels like a lot of those like plays in the 90s, they were all very like strong-handed.
Yeah.
Turn or burn,
Burn, yeah.
And so it feels like we were always trying to, push that envelope pretty hard. And so I learned that as a kid a little bit about like, oh man, like some of the decisions we're making from a production standpoint, which was very small at that time. But some of the decisions we're making are trying to create moods that are going to affect the way people are looking at the scene and change their mind about things. And so, that was interesting kind of growing up in that, and it sort of was ingrained in me. And so, I think coming out of that and like now doing lighting full time and have done it for 25 years, it's like, I think I know how to manipulate some emotions a little bit.
Yeah.
Know how to use the right color, the right angle, and the right thing to kind of set the tone.
Yeah. And not that it's manipulation, but it is about telling a story.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think if we can use technology to leverage that storytelling aspect, it helps people engage
That's right.
in a way that's pretty compelling.
That's right.
Yeah, there's a lot we should dive into there. First, so Tony, we have a segment on the podcast where it was originally titled kind of Mixed Review with Jeff, but it's kind of turned into folks submitting their service recordings and asking for, sometimes brutally honest feedback. Sometimes it's overall, the point is we're able to help by giving them some feedback, whether it's audio, video, lighting, musical components of that. So we've got some folks who submitted. Austin, what's the name of the church again? Grace City. Yeah. Let's watch that, and then we'll tell them what we think.
We'll put our hands together.
Initial thoughts.
I want to hear from you
Okay.
about scenic and lighting, and that since you're here, might as well.
I'd love to dive into it. So I think my first, like, this is hard to do. First of all, I was mentioning this earlier. I don't love just picking apart people's work because I know everybody's working very hard on it.
Yeah.
But no, I think a couple things I've learned over the last 6, 7, 8 years. I've been doing a lot more television work.
Yeah.
And not for church necessarily, but like for broadcast and working on award shows and different special events. And so one of the things that I've learned from the lighting designers I've been working with in that world is that if you want the lights to play well on camera, you need to get them down into the shot. And so the first thing we saw there is the lights were all above the screen.
Yeah.
And they're sort of whizzing around and, doing this sort of ballyhoo kind of thing, which is cool, but it doesn't really center your focus.
Yeah.
And on camera, the only thing in the shot becomes the screen.
Yeah.
And so what we do in the award show world is we start getting the lights in positions around, so you typically line the bottom edge of the screen, and then we'll cut parts of the screen out to where we can position lighting in the shot. So sometimes that ends up right in the center. We'll cut the bottom edge of the wall off and put a bunch of fixtures right in there. Or we'll cut sections out on each side that'll allow us to kind of have ladders or whatever that are down in the camera shot.
Yeah.
That way we're utilizing those fixtures, because what's happening is you're only getting the wide shot and the lights are there, but you're not getting it in the typical shots. And so
that's interesting.
That's been sort of a thing that I've been learning.
That's cool. So in this case, if they were to do that, because right now because my first thought was, well, it probably feels good in the room,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily translate to the camera.
No, that's right.
But if they were to do something like what you're suggesting, then it would actually serve both.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it could still look great in the room.
Yeah.
You still can have that sort of moving ballyhoo effect.
Yeah.
In a big moment like the downbeat of that chorus, it's like, okay, I want that energy.
Yeah.
But you would get it on the screen as well.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We've also sort of moved away from, and you'll watch the thing I just worked on, and I'm completely voiding what I'm about to say. I just did Brandon Lake's live from the Holy City live recording, and so that they just drop count them, and it's all kinds of crazy with lighting. But
that's Brandon.
Yeah, it's a little, and
It's some music.
that's kind of a special song too.
Yeah,
It's just it's a crazy energy song, and there's some moments in there where we're using a lot of moving lines. But one of the thing I would say is centering up a little bit more, using the lights to paint the stage a bit more. The one thing I noticed there is there's just so much like random movement happening instead of this and riding that beat and sticking to it and using those fixtures to play a role musically.
Yeah.
To me, that can get a little more interesting versus like,
Yeah.
and everything's just moving and randomly doing things instead of, and now
There's an
now we're
intensity
lighting
in
the
it, yeah.
stage. We're lighting all the people, and we're not just randomly moving all of our light sources all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
because I mean, from somebody who isn't, I'm not a lighting guy. From my perspective, I was like, the stage feels really dark.
That's right.
Like everything feels really dark, and if I were in that room, I think I would probably be like, what's happening?
Yeah.
It's taking my attention everywhere else.
Yeah.
To a point where it feels a little bit like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was interesting. That was the thing I noticed. I was like, there's a lot of light in that room, but I can't see the stage.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who's up there.
A good one to watch. A good one to watch of something I've done recently would be like, go check out. We just worked on the K-Love Fan Awards.
Mm-hmm.
Check out what the guys did there for Brandon's same performance. This is a good A/B. Is look at what we did for Holy City recording and look at what we did on K-Love. And K-Love is very broadcast focused, and it's shot completely differently. And look at what we did on Holy City. Holy City's like all out concert style versus what we did on K-Love Fan Awards. Same song, both locations, just totally different ways of lighting it.
That's
Might
good.
be kind of interesting for the audience to check that out.
That's incredible.
Let's rewind a little bit because I have a couple of questions about the church that we saw.
Yeah.
So if we were to give them some kind of helpful, or churches in general, not just them, but churches that have an LED wall on the upstage wall, and they're struggling with maybe how to get good key light,
Yeah.
and you've got this huge backlight in the wall, like what are some tips for just mitigating some of those opportunities?
Yeah.
Because you may not have enough front light to overwhelm the wall, or you might need to use the light fixtures that you have as backlight in a different way to work with the wall. Like
Jeff, I feel like you already know the answers to these questions.
I don't. That's why I'm asking, because I'm not a lighting guy, but I think there are people who struggle with lighting, especially as it relates to interacting with LED.
Yeah. So the first thing we do in broadcast world, so that's been the fun thing about getting to do screens a lot, is I've over the past 7 or 8 years, I've learned a lot about screens specifically. And in those scenarios, I'm typically working with a broadcast lighting designer who is very focused on, the look.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been fun for me because I get to step out of the designer's seat and become the person that's actually trying to make these things happen. And so for screens, the very first thing we do is we bring them down. We get them under control. So we'll look at them on camera. So the only way to really get a screen under control is you got to set your f-stops on your camera first. So you decide, okay, I need to set the exposure to whatever the lighting designer typically wants it to be. So exposure for us on like a K-Love Awards would be like a 3.2 to a 3.6, somewhere in there. So we get that set first. And then once that's set, then the wall, we bring that into the correct exposure range. So it's not overwhelming.
Because otherwise
the
it'll
camera.
blow it out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the very first thing is get the exposure set on the cameras, then bring the wall back into place. Now that can open up a world of problems, right? Just those 2 steps can like start a whole series of issues. If you're dealing with cheap LED, all of a sudden the image can kind of start to fall apart when it gets down low. And so if you're dealing with a nicer product, like a lot of the stuff we use is kind of a little bit higher end, it ends up looking really great at low levels, and it stays together, it doesn't fall apart. You don't see banding, you don't see some of the like weird things that you get whenever you're dealing with a cheaper product.
Yeah.
But anyway, all that said, we get the level low. Okay. Once the level is kind of set right, I will take and create a fader that is our kind of overall intensity for the wall. And I'll give myself about a 15% buffer. So if I need to put some dark content up on the screen, I can adjust that brighter if I need to. But I don't ever I don't run the whole show much more than at 85%. So I run almost the entire show. I sit the Grandmaster at 85. So, and then I can, if I do put something dark up, I can goose it a little bit if I need to. But I'm not trying to goose it a lot because I don't want to ruin the exposure we've got. Yeah. So it's all very controlled and safe. So that's kind of the first thing. Second thing is, I'm controlling the walls of the media server. So it gives me the ability to even do that from the start. Like I can sit there. Probably a lot of churches are using Resolume. I don't use Resolume. I use a product called Mbox, but it allows us to have a Grandmaster control. And I'm sure Resolume has something similar, but it allows you to just kind of master what the output will be. So that's kind of one of the things. Then lighting designer comes in and he starts getting his backlight right. Okay, I'm going to get all my backlights set for every position, and then key light. And he's not running bright key light. Like we're talking 30-foot candles, maybe max, 30, 40. Backlight might be a little hotter just to give it a little more presence. But like in general, it's all quite dark. But then that allows all of the lights that are doing our sort of like emotional hits and all the different things that we're doing in the background. That gives all those fixtures the ability to just womp. Yeah. Because there's all this headroom now in the shot. Yeah. So
if you want your fixtures to womp,
to womp,
headroom is the key.
Yeah, that's right. And we're not creating
space.
Yeah, we're creating kind of like these
depth almost like layers.
Yeah, we're creating depth exactly. And so it's like the wall is here, backlight pops the person out, key light brings their face to life, and then all the moving lights allow us to have all these accentuating hits and things happening around the talent. Yeah. But it's all about kind of painting this picture and setting everything in the right place exposure-wise so that it plays right.
Yeah. That's really good.
That's
and
really
I think
that plays a picture.
That really kind of sets the table for things like you can have intensity, you can have activity, but it's still tasteful.
That's right.
It's like it's not just flash and trash for its own sake.
That's right.
And I think that's, to me, the churches that have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of fixtures, a lot of things, people think, well, I have all this stuff, so I have to use it all the time. Yeah. It's like, really, let's get the balance of the look right, both on screen and on the camera lens. And then the room is like, at that point, the room's going to be fine, right? Because it's like if the human eye is looking at the screen and it looks great, then the human eye in the room is going to perceive this stuff being great as well.
Yeah, it's funny because like if you go sit in the K-Love Awards, it doesn't feel like we're lighting for television. It just feels like a really good looking show.
Yeah.
And although we do run the audience fairly bright, so that would be the one exception.
Got a little more house light than you normally would because you want to see the crowd.
That's right. The one exception would be that the audience is fully lit. And so I think people who are used to going to a concert and being in the dark, when you're on television, we don't do that. Yeah. But like I would say that's probably the main difference. In general, if you're just looking at the stage, it feels good. It doesn't feel, and I hear this argument among church people, actually, is the only place I ever hear it, is, oh no, we're lighting for live, or oh no, we're lighting for camera. And it's like, it doesn't have to be an and or. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like this one or that one. It can be a both. Yeah. That worked well together.
Well, in these days, it needs to be.
Yeah. It has to
because be. Because everybody who is at that level of production is doing a live stream that needs to look good.
That's right.
But it also needs to take into account the experience for the people in the room. So it has to be both.
Yeah, that's good.
That's exactly right.
And that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So I want to zoom out a minute here. I want to make sure I'm intentional about how I tee this up. But Tony, I I'm really excited you're here because obviously MxU, most of us are audio worship folks. We don't have a ton of lighting experience. But obviously on the MxU platform, we have a ton of lighting training. And something that comes up often, Nate could probably pull up all the comments on our ads or other posts that people have in the church community about lighting in the church. And for some, just being honest, like they get pretty rough. Like there's a lot of people that have a really difficult time with the way we use lights in church today. And like more than, audio doesn't really get that bad rap. Sometimes people will complain about the volume. Video doesn't really seem to get a bad rap often, but lighting just almost every day of the week, I'm betting if we're posting something or we're telling the community, here's how you maintain this moving fixture, or here's how you do haze or whatever it may be. I'm betting 10 out of 10 that there's gonna be some people who have some issues with that, right? Which that's just kind of how things go. But I'm really curious to get your perspective because the church is influenced so much by CCM and what we're doing out in tours and in the secular space of how we approach big shows these days. And we kind of have this internal conversation often of like, hey, what is essential and what might be excess? And from somebody who has dedicated their career to this, and you're a professional and you have so much experience in the field, but you also have a lot of wisdom and understanding of the church. How does that hit you, and how have you wrestled with some of that in why we do what we do today in the church from a lighting perspective? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think I caught most of it. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, there's a ton there.
Yeah, so I think, man, it was so big and broad.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on. Hone it in.
So I think the core issue is the distinction between things that are essential about lighting, and things that might be excess. And because I think when people complain about lighting or they say we have issues with lighting, it's probably, the way we use moving fixtures. Is it distracting? Because obviously we need lights, right? Unless we're in a, totally day-lit auditorium with nothing that happens in the evening, we're going to need lighting. Whether it's house lights or whether it's stage lights or what,
even room lighting.
Lighting is
every church is going to have a light.
Lighting is essential.
I just went through this at Easter actually. It was super interesting. I hadn't lit anything for a church in a minute, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to go in and we're going to light this thing. But then you start getting into the problems that they've had in the past with maybe other operators or whatever, and you start kind of coming up against where the boundaries are. Because this church already had some rules in place about things they liked and didn't like and all that, and it's like, well, why do we have that rule? Well, it's because an operator abused it or whatever, and so you're having to go in and go, okay, I don't know that should actually be a rule, so let's fix that. And
it's the same with audio.
Do it well.
It's like
let's do it tastefully.
The reason we have a dB limit is because somebody just overdid it a while back. 10 years ago, somebody's ears got burnt because a guy who didn't know what he was doing. And now we have this very strict rule that doesn't need to be a rule. It needs to be a guardrail, maybe. But even at that, it's like, no, just because somebody screwed it up in the past doesn't mean we have to sort of make that the gospel moving forward.
And I think that's kind of the thing, right? Is like all of a sudden we've got all these rules in place because of the past. And then you slide into a position, and I've got a decent amount of experience at this point. And it's like I can kind of go, okay, well, I know when this thing that you're saying is a rule we can't do. I know when this needs to happen exactly right, and execute it the way it's supposed to be executed. And then all of a sudden, that's not really a problem anymore.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so let's all start with a blank palette. And then let's just be careful about how we do the things that we do. And let's do them really thoughtfully. Haze was one of those things. Okay. So it's like, okay, well, haze gets out of control here. We don't like to run it more than this long. And then it like dissipated too quickly. And I was like, okay, well, let's stop. First problem, the hazers are in the wrong locations. They're clouding up everything. They're blowing in down low. They're in the camera shot. They look terrible. I don't like clouds on screen. Like that's not what we're after. We're after haze. Let's move them up into this church had a upper level on either side, upper balcony on either side of the stage. that was just for production. And so we just put those hazers up there, kind of buried in the wings, up high.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden the haze came to life and there was no clouds in the shot.
Yeah.
And it was like, now we can run it as much as we want.
And they're not really seeing haze. They're just seeing the
They're
beams
just seeing
of
the
light.
beams look great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so some of it is just like making those subtle adjustments to maybe it's a physical movement of something or, whatever, but it's like just making those quick adjusts and it's like, boom, now all of a sudden we have the products doing the things that they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
It's just using the stuff right.
Yeah.
Is sometimes the big thing.
Hmm.
So instead of, but the rule would have been don't use haze because
Yeah.
X, Y, Z. This is not our look. This is not our aesthetic. Whatever. No. Hold on. Let me fix it first.
Yeah.
And then now let's do it. So that worked out really well there.
Yeah.
And then they loved it. They were like, oh man, this looks amazing. It looks better than ever. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, yeah, we just fixed the problem.
Yeah.
So
So I'm curious. I don't know how much you've wrestled with this. I know I have. How we have introduced theatrical lighting into the church.
mm-hmm.
When you're approaching that, and you're the one who's kind of thinking about the bigger picture, the story that's being told, and your part that you play in that. What's your answer if someone were to ask you, like, why do you do that? Why? What part does that play? Theatrical lighting in the church. How would you approach that question in the why behind it all?
I wrestle with this.
Yeah.
And I've been on camera saying this for a number of years, but there's part of me that wishes that we didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a strong part of me that thinks it would be just great to have the church be natural light and be, just a warm, inviting place.
Yeah.
Kind of not unlike your lobby, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or your y'all's hangout space up front. It's just so like welcoming and inviting. It's got natural light. And it just makes you feel at home immediately.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that I wish we could go back and redesign. And I think if I was involved in designing any spaces in the future, I think I'm about to start on a project soon. And I want to try to influence it that way as much as possible because I just think we've gotten off so far into the moving lights and the LED walls and all that. And I love it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Those are great tools, but they've been kind of overused the same way. And I think it would be interesting to start using those same tools in new ways to create a more inviting space.
Yeah.
Hide them, hide the fixtures.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you see the effect of the light, but you don't see the light. LED walls, make them part of the architecture.
Yeah.
We need to be able to change the scene in the space. So how do we do that? Well, we use an LED wall to do that.
Yeah.
So much of what we're seeing in the church right now is like, oh, I can use Resolume and put up some goo behind the band.
Yeah.
Instead of using the LED wall as a thing that can create the architecture that is behind the band.
Yeah.
We've been playing with that a ton lately with an Unreal Engine.
Yeah.
I have a guy that I work with called Taylor Lowe. Shout out Taylor. But he does a lot of Unreal work. And so what I'll do is I'll come up with a scene that I'm thinking of and I'll say, hey, I've got this idea for a scene.
Yeah.
Can you build it? We just did this on a CMA fest that I worked on. And we wanted to be able to, what would it look like if behind the screens we could see, the structure of the stage?
Yeah.
It's an outdoor stage, right? So it'd be cool if we could see all the trussing or the scaffold or what could it be? Could be scaffolding. It could be whatever we make it to be.
Uh-huh.
And so we created in the wings, the LED walls were 50 feet tall or whatever, and took up the whole wing. So we just made it look like you were looking through the screen and there's scaffolding back there. There's road cases sitting behind it. There's stuff. We're creating the architecture of the space instead of just putting goo up to look at goo. We're just creating our own architecture. And I think that's some of the stuff that we could be doing that could be more interesting. I think that can go not just creating scaffolding, but creating all kinds of different things that could be back there, season to season, week to week. I think there's the ability to create hey, we're going to create a stone structure here, and there's going to be screens placed in the right locations in that scene.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a totally different way of using an LED wall.
Well, especially in a church, it's like if you start to think creatively about liturgy or about things that are historical or about any kind of those things. It's like, man, to create a look, to create our space to reflect some of those things that we're talking about, even in a talk or a sermon series, or what, not just musically, but in the whole sort of run of service. It could be, really cool to explore some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Our friend Davis Cornegay, he did something really cool for Crowder recently. He created this piece of content. We used it at Caleb, actually. Created this piece of content where Crowder's standing in front of a rock structure. It's like all just like mountainous rock. But then he lights it in the scene with like strobe lights and like flashing amber lights and all these different things that are kind of like going to the music, right? You would think when that scene comes on, the wall went up, that Crowder was actually standing in front of rock. If you look at it on camera, it looks like he's standing there in front of a mountainscape. Wow. But it was just done so well. Yeah. And that's the stuff that I think we need to be more focused on. Anyway, I just find it more, cool. Well, I find it more interesting than goo.
Yeah, and it's an example of how you can enhance rather than distract.
That's right. That's right.
And I mean, when we look at Scripture, God was very detailed in how he wanted the temple to look.
That's right.
He was very detailed with how the tabernacle to look and the Ark of the Covenant. He's very detailed and meticulous on how structures look. And I think us as the Western Evangelical Church, we have these tools in our toolbox, and we've just gotten lazy with them.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking like, hey, this is the tools that God has given me to help share his story and paint a picture. And I think that's what I'm hearing of what you're saying, Tony, is let's think about this as we're creating an environment where, because I mean, with the way church is these days, it's people are coming to a service. Mm-hmm. And so how can we create this worship center to not necessarily be a black box? If it is, okay. But how can we manipulate that? Not manipulate, but how can we use what we have to create a space that is warming, welcoming, all the things that we want and desire as people, instead of come and watch this show.
Yeah. Right.
Because nowadays we have more and more tools that can, instead of thinking of it as just a stage, we can think of it as a canvas.
Yeah.
Right. You're creating a space within a space almost, or a space out of the space.
That's right.
That seems like its own physical space.
That's right.
Because the computerization and the automation and all those things are so much more capable than they used to be.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there are functional pieces of production. You know, like a key light is a functional piece of production. You have to light the person that's speaking or singing or whatever. You know, iMag screens are functional. You have to have those elements, you know, so that the audience that is far away can see. But I think it's how we're using the rest of the system to create let's call it the art. But to create the art in the background, that like, what are we doing with all of that?
Yeah.
Are we like off on a tangent, just doing what we see at concerts? Because I don't know that that's what church needs.
Well, and that's what I'm hearing from, I've heard that too many times. And that's where a lot of my wrestling has come from, because churches will go, well, they're used to seeing it out here in the world. And evangelical churches will take on the mindset of like, we're trying to create experiences that match up with the quality of the concert that they went to on Friday night. And it's like, I just don't necessarily know if that's effective or if it even works, because we're not able to execute at that level. Yeah. It's usually just a worse version. And a more distracting version. And so, man, I really appreciate, I legit, I've always been curious what you thought of that, and I've never asked you, but I think your response is really appreciated and thoughtful, because I think coming from somebody who you dedicate all your time to this specific discipline, in whether, you know, in the church, outside of the church, it can be really easy to, I think we find that if like there's a role we play, it needs to fit perfectly in the space, right? Well, and you're like, I actually sometimes wonder, maybe this can look different or simple, whatever, and not just keeping up with, well, this is what the guy on that tour is doing. So I need to do it this way too.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we've got into in the church, because everybody, you can see what everybody's doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's online.
But typically we can't keep up.
We can't keep
it's
up.
not.
What's funny and what's interesting to me, even when we watched the Brendan Lake video, not the Caleb thing, but the other one, everybody in the crowd had their phone up recording what they were seeing.
Yeah.
They weren't even looking at it. They were looking at their phone looking at it.
Yeah.
So that's the world we're in. It's like, okay, as impactful as that was, people, even at that level, aren't necessarily always engaging with it the way we think they should.
Yeah. We want them to put their phones in a bag.
Yeah, exactly.
just
I
love
wish
it.
they would.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, are you trying to create an experience that looks like the Sphere?
Yeah.
Or are you trying to invite people into your living room to hear the message of the gospel?
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say let's rewind a little bit, because not everybody has all that technology. Some people don't have any of that technology.
That's
so for the person who resonates with what we said earlier about, hey, let's use lighting to leverage emotion, not to manipulate, but to further engage, to draw people in. Like, what are some just quick tips that you would say to somebody who has a basic, I've got LED park hands, I've got small fixtures, I've got not the best and brightest moving heads, but I've got a few things. Like, are there some tips that you could say, here's how to think about how to engage people emotionally?
Yeah. I think just begin with the fundamentals. If you're not working with much, begin with the fundamentals, and that is making sure that the people on stage are lit right, and that they have a key light that makes them pop out. If you're not dealing with an LED background, you probably have some kind of background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the thing would be then to make sure that that background is lit with something.
Yeah.
And then ultimately make sure that there's a backlight to pop them away from that background. If you can do those three things first,
Because that creates some depth, and
Yeah,
that's the first step of making
yeah.
those layers.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm kind of into what we're doing here too. I'm into the soft boxes and all the things that we're kind of practical lighting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but in the scene, there's a practical light behind Jeff over here.
Yeah.
And there's a couple like lighting up the trees. This
We're
is
even
just
lighting up our snare drum over
yeah,
there.
and there's a light in the snare. I mean, there's just different things in this scene that are so simple, and they're lighting elements, but they're just on, and they're just I call them practical elements. They're just doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's
and
really good.
there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with lighting a scene like this, and this being church.
Yeah.
And using a soft light to make sure the pastor's lit, and we're done. Like, it's over.
Yep.
I just think we've gotten so into, no, this is how it has to be. It needs to look like a rock concert. And I just don't know that that's true.
Yeah.
And I hope that we're not only doing that, I hope that there's some more opportunity over the next 10, 15, 20 years where we're going to start exploring, yes, we have the technology, but we don't have to use it in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving lights can be very functional in that they can be used to light things.
Yeah.
People forget that.
Yeah.
They're not just beams and
Yeah.
smoke,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're all going to be AI by then anyway, so it's not going to matter.
I really do appreciate your perspective though, Tony, because I think I'm walking away from this conversation going like, lighting isn't the devil. Like, you can use it to your advantage.
No.
And I think sometimes like we see churches trying to be the cool concert, and really it's just kind of mid-tier karaoke. And it's like,
Mid-tier karaoke.
Sorry.
It
I'm
really
on one
is.
today.
It really
I've
is.
had one too many cups of coffee.
Well, at least your karaoke singer is singing out of tune, so it fits.
But it's like no, like we have the greatest message to tell, and we don't have to try and be something we're not. We can, in everything we do, we can point people to Jesus.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I guess this is Tony affirmation time. We don't normally do this,
Oh,
Tony.
gosh.
No, but man, your perspective is so intentional.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I've always had so much respect for you, is because you're intentional. I mean, even I think I first met you when you came through Bayside 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was always like, man, Tony, what's different? Like, there's just something different. The intentionality. It's so easy with these tools to let the tools make the decision.
Yeah.
But instead, you're looking at the larger picture, and And that's where like I think the first time I heard somebody describe like lighting is like artistry was, I think you were in that conversation,
That's
right?
funny.
And talking
That's an
about
honor.
you and the way that you approach it. So,
Yeah.
and it is an incredible tool we can use today in modern day to spread that message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even in something as dramatic as the Brandon Lake thing, like to me, when I think about Tony's work, I think it's always so tasteful.
Yeah.
It's like even something that has that amount of movement, that amount of impact, it's like, man, it's just right. It's
Yeah.
like it fits in this, like you used the word artistry. It's like there's this artistic box that is just tasteful. So that's what I've always appreciated about you.
Yeah.
Intentional down to the power washer.
Yeah.
With its pistol.
Yeah.
Yeah, with his pistol power washer.
You know,
So-
a funny story. I don't approach my artists that much.
Yeah.
But Brandon and I have a good relationship.
Yeah.
And when we were shooting K-Loves, just talking about intentionality, we're at the Opry, right? And there's this one spot on the stage. It's a circle, and it's got a ring of LED around it. And that circle it's a piece of wood that was cut out of the Ryman, and it was placed at the Opry. And everyone, forever, since there's been a Ryman or since there's been an Opry, has stood on that circle.
That's been downstage center.
That's been downstage center. And so it's this very precious piece of wood.
Yeah.
And I know about it because I lived in Nashville for years, and I just know kind of about the history and whatever. And during rehearsals, Brandon came out and he was just going for it, like right up on the front edge of the stage. And I said to him, I wasn't even near the stage. I was at my console, and I could tell they were trying to figure out like staging with him. The directors were telling him one thing, and I think he had different voices in his ear. And I just got up from my desk, and I don't ever do this. And I walked right all the way down to the front edge of the stage, and I said, "Hey," and I don't even know if he knew I was there.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, bud," and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I was like, "Stop for a second." He's like, "Okay, I want you to land on that circle on the bridge of the song." I said, "Whenever because that there's a very dramatic bridge where a backlight comes on." And I said, "I need you to be in that one spot, get off the front edge of the stage and go back there." And he's like, "Got it." I'm like, "Cool." And he did it, dude. That's the wood.
Yeah.
It was so intentional. I wanted to make sure he knew. I didn't explain all that to him.
Yeah.
But he knew, I knew, we all knew what it was. And I said, "Just land on the circle." And he's like, "Got it." So he hits his knee, and boom, backlight comes on, and he's there on.
That just gives me
It's
chills.
just a moment. It's maybe something people don't pick up on, but to me is a really cool moment because that's him going, "I'm here to stay.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm going to be with all y'all for a while."
Man.
You know,
That
I know,
level,
it's kinda
that
cool.
level of intentionality is so cool. Well, for the people who do use or want to use more advanced tools, I think what's cool is that tomorrow on the MxU platform, we're dropping a course all having to do with Resolume. So our friend Caleb came in and is going through the basics of how to implement Resolume in your workflow. And so, he talks about just composition structure and content positioning and how to move stuff around and pixel maps and all these kind of things that people, working with effects, like stuff that people really want to do when they're working with Resolume. So
You just said a lot of video words that I didn't know.
I
were in
know
your
it's crazy. I'm
vocabulary.
learning so much
You're
on the
learning.
MxU podcast. But anyway, we're excited about that. So, in terms of like that side of the content side, so we've talked a lot about lighting, but in terms of like media servers and other assets, like for people who are just kind of dipping their foot in that ocean, are there any like best practices for somebody who's just starting out in that world? Because I think the tendency for a lot of things is I have this tool, now I have to just explore all of it.
Yeah.
Like how do you not get overwhelmed with those kind of things, and how do you leverage that kind of keeping that tasteful mindset in mind?
Yeah. So this is a deep.
I know it's a deep subject.
Yeah, it's a super, super deep subject. But I'll start at the surface. You have to decide what you want to be doing with your server, with your content playback. Am I trying to just put graphics up that are going to be static? Because there's probably a product for that. Or am I just trying to play videos? There's probably a product for that. Am I trying to be extremely diverse and do all kinds of different things with it? Well, there's a product for that. So I think the first thing is understanding what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Am I just putting up graphics? Because you could use Pro Video Player, for instance, if you're just trying to put up a quick graphic or whatever, or Pro Presenter.
Yeah.
Or play a video or whatever. But if you're trying to do a bunch of like complex mapping and you're trying to do a whole bunch of like inbox scaling, if you're trying to do a bunch of 3D elements, there's going to just be different products for the different things that you're trying to do.
That's good.
So I would say just there's also one more thing. There's two styles of operation in the media server world. There's the sitting at the desk in front of a computer screen style of operation, which is very much like what Resolume does. So you drag a file into a thing and you hit play, and like it's all very much on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also console controlled media servers, and that's what I kind of specialize in. I use them deeply. Now there is a component where you're at a screen for a little bit, you're working, doing some mapping over there, but once you get into playback and actually manipulating the content, you're doing all that from the desk. And that I've found a really deep love for that, because I all of a sudden can use the content like a lighting element.
Yeah.
So if I want bumps of white or flashes or things to be doing accents like the lights are doing,
Mm-hmm.
I can do that way better on a console-driven media server.
That's cool.
I can make those cues just like light cues all of a sudden. So like a bump button for, like a strobe or something, I can do something similar, with the media server and a white layer.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's cool.
Or some sort of interesting file that I can just pop on and off. I find different ways to accent things. It's really fun.
That's cool. So for lighting designers and video producers and content creators and graphics ops, we're really excited about this Resolume courses, and we can't wait for you to dig in. I think especially as you learn how to integrate those elements as part of your scenic design overall, that's where we can find the marriage between video and lighting in a way that is effective and impactful and tasteful and all those things that we've talked about. So can't wait to hear what you think of these courses. We've got more to come, and we can't wait to bring it to you.
It's great.
Yeah, that's great. Well, man, Tony, thank you for being here today. We really appreciate
Great
you.
to be here.
Yeah, what
This
a
has
great
been-
conversation.
I've got some stuff to think about. This is really good. This is really good.
Spencer no longer thinks that moving lights are the devil. So
It's a therapy session, I guess. Well, really, a therapy session over our OCD nature. Is really what
it really affirmed your OCD.
This
And
is-
that was kind of a gateway into opening your heart.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. There's a lot of good from this.
This is why I get into pressure washers. I can just brain off, power spray.
Yeah, that's my next project for sure. Get a pressure washer installed on my garage. Well, cool. We'll see you next time.